Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Forge, where you can get your daily dose of Realogy and reclaim your awareness. Thank you for joining us again here today for our fourth installation on this channel. And the topic today is going to be on handling new information with maturity. This topic is coming from a realization that there is a growing number of people subscribing to teachings and philosophies that are considered enlightened or New Age. And a lot of times people that are leaning over in this direction, accepting these mentalities, often identify themselves as part of the woke or the conscious movement. Many are of the opinion that this new information is being presented to humanity for the first time, or that these new learnings should override religion. And they lean in that direction and kind of come to this conclusion because they contrast the messages that are being received in a lot of these newer circles, that being a message of unconditional love and acceptance of all versus the religious result of love and acceptance, usually of them that believe the same way you do, and often to the detriment of those who don't. The truth of the matter, my opinion, is that we are relearning the original material that was conferred to humanity in our ancient past, not that we're taking on something new or foreign or hearing it for the first time. When human hands and minds have handled that information, they repeatedly manipulated that information into the writings and the religions of today. Contained within those writings that were received in those ancient times was also guidance towards our advancement and our maturity, was also keys to successful self-governance and self-directed benevolence. And it's all been turned around and used as a tool for our control and our self-induced servitude. What we find is that all groups harbor unfavorable opinions about the other. And yes, even some of us who are in this enlightened, new age, woke, conscious movement, it's still quickly becoming this other sect that is striving to identify themselves apart from established religion or other spiritual groups that don't hold to the same mentalities. But it's much different when there is a history of using those ideals as justification to wipe out those not like them. So political and racial groups are definitely guilty of the same, but usually those groups don't hide behind or parade a banner of peace, and don't say that they have to always rely on peaceful methods to achieve their goals. Sometimes they're very blatant and very forthcoming in that they believe that using violence is going to be the key to them reaching whatever goal they have out there for their group. But you notice you haven't ever heard of the science crusades, right? You've never learned about when small factions of the enlightened and awoke groups embraced terrorism and used that as a means of pushing their ideals, right? Now, this is not just picking on religion, it's merely identifying the truth in history. That, we have maybe differences of opinion in scientific groups, but usually those end up pretty non-violent in a educational or philosophical kind of discussion. And we also, notice that, right, there's a lot of places, a lot of times we have instances where religion has inspired someone to go and eliminate another group. Okay, and it's just, again, usually so far has not been the case with the enlightened or woke groups, and usually is not the case with, science-based debates. So we have to observe what are the broad effects of adopting terminology like unbeliever, atheist, and infidel within religious or spiritual circles. Usually the intent of these identifying terms for the other group is to desensitize the masses from feeling compassion or value in the lives of anyone outside their group of qualified adherents. So I want to be transparent here, right? Not mincing words. I think that among those proclaiming peace, there is a lot to be gained from aligning austere religionists, among other divisory collectives, to a harmonious paradigm that values all life, regardless of whether they share your worldview. And if they don't share your worldview, I use this example because in religion, a lot of times those are the people who in those religious writings are fuel for the fire. We're taught and indoctrinated in a way to not feel pity for or compassion for those who are punished for not living the same lifestyle that you have, and therefore valuing their lives less. That's where I think there's the most to be gained, and getting people to understand a new spiritual paradigm that does value all life. This is not an attack on anyone's religion. I want to be clear about that. This is primarily a self-critique, knowing the way I was raised, conditioned, and instructed to think in the ministry, and yes, took part in telling others to do the same. This is a self-critique and realization of things I've participated in, but in acknowledging that those were things that I participated in and that were approved and even encouraged within those religious circles that I came from, where if somebody is not living the same lifestyle you are and they meet their end, they face some kind of catastrophic situation, the reason that we kind of use to justify that is always falling back on if they live their life like I do. If they had my same faith, followed my belief, those conditions wouldn't have come upon them, and that's just not the case. And it also, again, eliminates the need or the compassion that we need to have in looking at other people's circumstances. So this is an acknowledgement that humanity has a tendency to justify violent defense and violent enforcement of dogma that's supposedly leading us back to peace. Usually doesn't end up like that unless the peace comes after we've completely eliminated the opposing group, and it shouldn't be that way. Now, this is not the case with every human. I realize that, but the fact that it occurs in any human is indicative of a problem that needs correction. And any claim to peaceful religious beliefs is immediately called to question when those same beliefs are used as justification for harm being allowed or done to any other living being. Now, I know this is not the rules that we follow for our religious beliefs today. I'm saying this is the direction we need to be moving in. Peaceful religious beliefs should be peaceful in all circumstances and should not ever be used as justification for eliminating some other group because they don't hold to those same religious beliefs. At its core, this is a problem with the nature of man. But it is, we have to acknowledge, a problem that finds a path to manifestation via certain religious texts. Now, while alignment doesn't call for attacking any religion, it is an acknowledgement that our dogmatic defense of and dogmatic loyalty to them, those religions, is not working. The way that we can so easily cast somebody off, not consider their plight, their predicament, their situation, the help they may need, or looking at a situation that causes their death, their pain, their whatever, and saying, well, this is kind of what they deserve and have coming because God told them to do this and they're not doing it. That's not working for us. And reaching out and telling somebody that they have to, encouraging them so strongly to follow our path, right? Now, I recognize we're not living in the dark ages where, we drag people out in the street and stone them or burn them at the stake any longer. But there's still quite a few divisions and differences that are, again, in religions and spirituality that are defended violently. And that's the thing that we need to change. We need a better way. A way to believe something without that belief identity leading to damaging or harmful divisions. And I want to be clear. We need to refrain from violent defense or offense of an inherited idea, not of one's person. I'm not advocating that anyone refrain from defending themselves in a situation that warrants it. That's not the topic of this discussion, right? I'm not weighing in on personal self-defense, defense of one's family, and telling you how to do that. This is strictly in terms of violent defense or offense of inherited spiritual ideas. Inherited is the key word, right? Things that we've been handed and told to defend violently, not conclusions that we've arrived to on our own and based on our own experiences. And the violent defense of those is also not the ideal way to go. The information that our religious forefathers received was also New Age and enlightened for their day. We know that it was very different from what the established religious leaders taught, from the evidence that they faced so much resistance and persecution. That was the proof that the messages that they brought were not accepted, were not a norm, were not a part of the already established beliefs at the time. People proclaim these messages were received sometimes from angels. A lot of times those angels would be identified as light beings, and depending on if you go into other religious circles, they flat out say light beings sometimes. And you have a variety of occasions where people would get messages in different ways and non-conventional ways. And we'll say in modern terms that's mentally channeled. But back then, if they heard the still small voice in the back of their mind and they felt God was talking to them, that was called a prophecy, or it was called a spiritually inspired message. God spoke to me and said. Now, that same method of communication that people only proclaimed was God back then happens a lot more regularly than we would like to admit. And a lot of those works that happen in these days, they're called channeled works. To me, they're one and the same phenomena. It's just a matter of we've updated our terminology in more recent times. We're just better able to interpret the information that's being uncovered. And a very important point, that there's been little opportunity to corrupt those New Age and enlightened messages so far. We now have a couple thousand more years of experience under our belts, and we're not as superstitious and as gullible as humanity as a whole once was, especially when a lot of these messages were first being received. And as a result, our understanding of those old lessons can actually be deepened, and it's not a threat. It's not anathema. It's not blasphemous to say we can come to a better understanding with this newer information, more recent experiences that we have. We can actually take our understanding deeper than what we've had it, allowed it to be so far, and refresh that knowledge refresh our understanding based on present day knowledge. What I hope to do is to inspire us to distill benevolent teachings from all religions, minus the dogma, minus the personal offense if somebody believes or proclaims something different. We need to be able to pull those benevolent teachings out and keep all the hurt feelings and violent defenses out of the way. I believe that this was the original intent of those messages that were received in ancient times. I think we have to filter out the corruptions which have led to all forms of genocide, thievery, hatred, oppression, and anything else that brings harm or prevents actions of benevolence and service to any other living being. Again, to summarize, two things that have to be done: distill the benevolent teachings out, and then filter out the man-made corruptions that have led to all of these negative things being allowed, being encouraged, and rejoicing in seeing these things being done to people that you feel are a part of a different group that maybe has it coming and deserves that. Now, I'm putting this out here as an open challenge for anyone to say that this is not a worthwhile goal, even if it does cost you relinquishing barbaric aspects of our valued religions that allow for such hateful actions and behaviors to occur in the first place. The warning, the concern here is that, as I said, even with these newer age, enlightened, whatever kind of messages that are coming through these days, which again, and I'm not saying that in a way to devalue them. I'm looking at them too, and I find value and I'm learning a lot in them. But we have to be cautious because, as I said, I think that this is a repeat of the same information that humanity received in our ancient days, right? And I think that given time in the hands of immature humanity, the same present message of unconditional love and peace and acceptance of everyone, that same message has the tendency to once again be corrupted if it's left in the hands of immature people or people that have ulterior motives that are not set for the best interest of humanity. We have to be careful. These messages seem and sound new because the words that we hear out of our religions have been changed, but I think that this is the same original message that was first received. We have to be cautious. We have to be vigilant to make sure that the clarity in this unconditional love message remains even after our time has passed. If we let this message get corrupted, it's going to once again be manipulated into another controlling religion in a few hundred years from now, if we're not careful. I do believe this can be prevented, but it's going to take effort. Now, we'll able to show parallels between scripture, science, and New Age teachings on this channel, as I mentioned, in finding these unifying threads. I want to illustrate how some of the alleged new information was the same information disseminated thousands of years ago. We'll show examples of this. And we'll witness how often Enlightenment teachings can supplement and clarify some of the scriptural mysteries and obscure passages that we've either been discouraged away from trying to understand or seeking a better understanding on, or that we're flat out told this is God's domain. It doesn't make sense to you because God knows the plan and he's executing this other plan and he works in mysterious ways. So if you don't understand it, move on. Don't dwell on it. Don't keep pressing. There's some things that, we accept that there's some things we're just not meant to know. And I don't think that's the intent of any of the messages that we've received or the intent of our Creator. And as we get better clarity in some of those more obscure and mysterious passages, I believe that it presents the possibility of attaining an understanding that encompasses all religion and transcends nationality. And this would be an understanding that applies very simply to all of humanity. We sometimes fail to see how interconnected our ideals actually are. Religion often surrounds the unknown in this aura of mystery that's later clarified by science. Remember when humanity used to worship fire? Science came along, we started to better understand it, how to manipulate it, how to make it, how to control it, and the aura, the mystery around it went away. On the other hand, science chooses to remain blind to phenomena believed by the religious, often learning later that there was actually real science behind what was witnessed. Think about the ancient writings in India, and they mention these vimanas, the vehicles that their gods traveled in. Science would have been quick and has been quick to dismiss that as mythology. Until now, we have more modern sightings of UFOs that fit the same description. And what was once considered this mythology, these vehicles that would fly the gods around, as we now understand and identify anti-gravitic technology and electromagnetic technologies that can mimic the same movements of those craft, of those vimanas, those vehicles. Well, now it's not considered mythology anymore because now they actually have some scientific principle to hang it on and to make it real to them. So anytime we're dealing with this unknown, you have the religious that will quickly embrace it because it's unknown. And a lot of times science will ignore it because it's unknown until we have something that we do know that we can actually tie to it, right? That there's a better way we can kind of connect our ideals across these unknown spaces and really figure out how the two different areas can usually help one another. This is an important reminder that this is an attempt to find a common thread in all facets of human understanding, but it is not an accommodation. I've said that before. We're not just doing this just to say, let's have a kumbaya moment and everybody forget about all of our perceived differences, our different understandings. It's not that. It's if we sit down and talk to one another and lay our beliefs out side by side and sit there and actually listen to, with the intent of just listening and not converting someone to believe the same way that you do or think the same way that you do, we might actually learn something. We'll find that we have more in common than we're willing to admit right now. And it's a realization based on observation and study. Having looked beyond what we're told and allowed to in Christianity, you realize that there's actually some other works that, again, fill in some of the gaps and actually work or to increase your understanding above and beyond maybe what we were allowed to grasp or to understand based on having one book that was really encouraged for us to look at and anything else was kind of questionable. Okay? And this stems from the awareness that division is an unnecessary illusion and that our unity is inevitable. So if you think about one of the easiest things in the world to do, it's to make any human being get roused up once you tell them that they have an enemy. Okay? And it's usually successful, no matter what separation tactic you use. If you talk from a standpoint of politics, from race, from religion, from science, from class, social order, all these other things, it's very, very easy to say you have this person on the other side of whatever separation tactic you're going to use that doesn't like you, that doesn't have your best interest in mind, that hates you because of what you are, that's looking to eliminate you. And it's very, very easy to get most human beings riled up with that kind of introduction and to get them on a side. Maybe it's not going to be the side you try to pull them onto, but they'll take a side because this person is attacking me or this group is attacking me and wants me to be an enemy. I'm going to be an enemy to them. A very, very easy thing to do. It takes very little effort to make a human being hate any other human being based on differences. Now, notice I didn't say they didn't hate any human being that is different from them, right? I said on the basis of differences. Because if you think about it, there's very few actual differences between us. You start to count how many things all human beings have in common. From a physiological standpoint, we're all bipedal. We all have opposable thumbs. We have the same blood type, no matter what continent you come from, what color your skin is, texture of your hair, anything else. We have the same basic blood types that all humanity shares. Same number of limbs, same orifices. Our hair grows in the same place. We all have finger and toenails that grow in the same place. We all have the same organs that grow in the same place. And millions and millions of additional things in terms of our physiology alone that are shared and identical across all of humanity. We're affected by and subject to the same illnesses as this pandemic that's been raging on in 20 and 21. And we can see that, it hasn't been divided along racial or political lines. It's affected anybody that's human, right? We need the same atmospheric conditions. You could take humans from opposite ends of the planet and you drop them on the moon without a spacesuit or a breathing apparatus, they'll die. We need the same atmospheric conditions for us to live and to thrive. We're subject to the same world systems, governments, economic systems. We have the same language capabilities. We have the capacity to do harm and violence. All of us do. We're killed by the same things. A bullet to the head will kill somebody that's from Europe as quickly as it will someone from Asia, from Africa, from America, or anywhere else. And our brain works the same, right? A complex organ in itself, but our psychology, our emotions, our sleep cycles, our dreams, our trauma, depression, dopamine euphoria, and a number of other things related to the brain and how it works are all the same. Our reproductive organs, our reproductive activities, our reproductive processes, the same across all of humanity. We have the same effects from fitness routines, lifting weights, from exercise, and many, many, many more things. There's literally millions of things if we were to sit down and kind of think through every single thing that humans have in common. I'm sure there's millions of things that we just won't have time to list right now. And with literally millions of things shared between all of humanity, it's amazing to me how easily we focus on so few differences, such a small list of differences, and can draw so much hate from such a small list. We have millions of things in common and a list of maybe 7 or 8 main things that cause people to hate each other everywhere else that's not like them. And I think it's because part of us loves to be unaccountable children. I was raised this way. I was taught this way. Somebody told me that they were considering me an enemy before I even knew they were an enemy back to me, right? So if somebody told me that this person is against me, I'm just accepting what I was told. Let's do better. Let's think about these things. Let's think about the millions of things we actually share, and is 7 or 8 differences really worth throwing away and ignoring the millions of things we have in common? Instead of calling on you to recognize an enemy on this channel, which is an easy task that even a child can achieve, as we see demonstrated on playgrounds across the world, I'm going to offer you a more difficult challenge. Now, I'm going to give my viewers credit for being too intelligent to be suckered by a lame attempt at reverse psychology. I'm not saying I'm going to give you a challenge that I really want you to say, oh, well, I'm better than this challenge, I can do it, just to force you to do something or to trick you into doing something. That's not what this is. Except this is a very transparent and a very honest assessment, because my challenge will reveal the true level of maturity in a person. What is that challenge? See the consistency of all ancient scriptures and ancient writings. Their singleness in conveying to us tenets to make us better. It's not so much about this scripture or this passage tells an Indian person to do one thing and an Afghan person to do something different, and an African person to do something different, and a European person to do something different. Let's look at where they're all the same. Let's look at where they're telling us things to do to be better. Not pay so much attention to the difference in wording or the difference in name and context. Let's pull out the good parts. The parts that are telling us to be better, and then let's sit down, let's share them, and actually work to be better. Now, how do we do that? It's not anything that's going to be settled in one discussion, in one channel. It's a worldwide conversation that I'm talking about needs to happen. Worldwide effort that would be needed to realize this. But because my mind goes through a lot of these things just throughout the day, I will lay some of the things out that I think are key to our next steps forward. And this goes back to, again, the concept that I presented in the previous video of empowerment principles for humanity. Right, to injure or to allow injury to no one, no matter how weak, no matter how oppressed, no matter how incapable they may be of doing it on their own. That gives the rest of us even more responsibility to make sure that we're not allowing it to happen to anyone. And it just has to have a priority over profit, period. I am not against capitalism, I'm not against profit, but the fact that we can put profit over human lives, this is a fallacy. This is a shortcoming that we have to do better. We can have capitalist systems, we can have businesses that thrive and that have high profit points without allowing injury to be done for the sake of winning that profit. You make a few people rich and you get thousands of people sick or injured. It's not worth it. It's not the right way to go. We got to do better. Better than just tolerance of all, because it's very easy to say, I'll tolerate you. I'll tolerate you for a little bit. I can listen to you for a few minutes, tolerate you. I'm not going to hate you, but it's not the same as embracing somebody that's different. Embrace our similarities, appreciate differences and contributions of others. And we have to have a collective effort to preserve all cultures, right? Because there's a mentality that cultures are, somebody feels that their culture is trying to be wiped out, and that kind of sparks some kind of emotion in them. We should make an effort to make sure we're preserving information from all cultures and that these things are not lost over time. Do all the good that you can. Now, this means seeking opportunity to do good to someone you consider other. It's very easy to do for somebody that you think is like you or shares one of your groups that's close to your heart. Make an effort to do something good for someone that you consider different than you, that you normally would not communicate with, not fellowship with, talk to, whatever the case is, and focus on doing something good for them. Because the better each human group fares, the better our collective experience of humanity will be overall. We have to seek and acknowledge coherency in all ancient writings to mature and to empower humanity. Now, this means turning from the tribal mentalities that we have over dogma right now. Just turn from it. I'm not going to say resist it. I'm not going to say fight against it. I'm just going to say turn from it. It's there. It's a possibility. It's a path that hasn't worked very well for us. Let's turn from that and turn towards something better. Turn towards a love-inspired effort to collect benevolent spiritual instruction from around the world and then be empowered to enhance our civilization in unison with or without our leaders. The fact that we a lot of times have to wait until we feel someone is taking up the mantle and is leading the way is a fallacy that's in us. And this is part of our empowerment principles, is to not have to sit there and wait for somebody to lead you down the right path. We can start down that path with or without leadership. Continuing on to a few more of those points that again have to be labored to expand and to continue to build up as a collective effort. No man and no institution can allow or inhibit your access to the Creator. Okay, this is an empowering principle. You don't have to have somebody there as a mediator for you now. You don't have to have somebody tell you what it takes for you to get to God or tell you when you've reached that point and when you have not. You can have a relationship, a personal relationship with the Creator right now. You can communicate with the Creator right now without having to wait for somebody to do it for you or to establish that communication or plead on your behalf. You can do these things right now. You have to emphasize in your communication at times your mental silence and listening, as opposed to the way a lot of us have been trained to flood your mind with your own random debasing requests and quotations. Oh, I'm not good enough to come ask you this, but I come to ask you humbly to do this and do that. And it's just this mindset of coming in and digging, tearing ourselves down before we make a request, and then to come in begging and it's just the whole mentality that we've had forced on us. It just doesn't serve us very well. And I think that there's a better way. I think that the Creator hates and despises none of you, regardless of your past. And also we have to realize that there's no benefit in hating ourselves and proclaiming powerlessness. God wants us, the Creator wants us to be seeking and living in power that we're meant to have, and not relinquishing it to these institutions or other people. Okay, your purpose is your own. You can determine who and what you want to be without having someone tell you what your purpose is. The Creator does not require, does not delight in, or does not thrive on your fear. When you see fear present, whether it's in any spiritual, religious setting or anything otherwise, God is not there. That's not the way that God works. That's not an emotion and a feeling that he uses in any way. It's the polar opposite. We have to believe, because you can find, and again, my background in Christian ministry, you'll find verses that talk about how good it is to fear God. And then you have later verses that talk about how, perfect love casts out fear. And there's these kind of combating mindsets where fear is good in one case, and then in another case to say, well, you can't live by it, you can't have this. Fear is just out, period. It's not the way that the Creator works. And when you see that, when it's present, you have to notice that, okay, this is something that's going in a different direction than I want to go in, and it's not going to lead to my empowerment. Anyone that wants you in fear to have you controlled, or to have resources siphoned from you, or to use you for the benefit of the person that wants you to be in fear. It's not how the Creator works. The Creator is not lying in wait like a predator to execute you the second that you mess up. Okay? All of these things I know firsthand are present in religious systems, and they cannot be for us to go on and achieve what we're supposed to achieve. I believe that at one time our unity showed enough potential that it was perceived as a threat. And I think that time was when mankind endeavored in a place called Babylon, or Babel, to more common tongue. And the endeavor there was to reach the heavens. And we know the story of the tower that was being built because they wanted to reach the heavens. And I believe that the threat that was posed at that time was to another flesh and blood ruling class, and not to our Creator, as we've been told is the case. I think our unity is what our Creator wants. It's what he thrives for. It's the overall goal of a lot of the religious writings around the world. It is our ultimate purpose. The challenge is to be better, and this challenge offers no advantage based on what country you originate from, neither by what name you call the Creator. We've got to take inventory, because there's a lot to be done and a lot to be undone. We've done a lot of hurt to one another, and we've done a lot of hurt to ourselves as well. While our present material focuses on religious and spiritual agendas, there is still significant issues that remain to be addressed in the political, the racial, and other arenas. But some things are consistent and common across the whole spectrum. Control mechanisms exist in all of these things, in religions, spiritual groups, in political groups, and racial groups. There's very little of your own opinions, if you really stop and think about it, that were independently developed. And in these systems, once they get you your control, get you under control rather, get you accepting these ideals and opinions as your own, a lot of times your resources start to get funneled to those leaders, and those who are at the top of those groups have an unfair benefit, an unfair advantage. And there's also a direct inverse relationship we have to be aware of, right? Because the increased distractions that we have all result in reduced awareness. The more distractions, the more things we have going on and occupying our mind, the less aware we are of what things are going on around us, especially when it's something that's detrimental to us. We need to move forward while being mindful of the past, and to ensure that we don't repeat the same errors. This unprecedented advancement that humanity has undergone in the past 200 years has outpaced the advancement of the 2,000 years before it. We must acknowledge what the passing of time and advancement means for humanity. The conversation you have with your 4-year-old child is much different than when that child turns 40 years old. Similarly, there was only so much that humanity was capable of processing, of retaining, or understanding back when we were fresh out of the garden, or mere days out of trees, caves, and ape fur, whichever way you're leaning, both of which I think have true merit back in our history. But that's where we were when some of these messages were initially received. We were in our infancy as a species, and humanity is in a much, much different place now. We are now capable of having the adult conversation that we were not collectively prepared for, back when our perspective of the universe was that the earth was at the center of all creation, and that there was an entirely different and unattainable realm in existence just above the clouds of our own atmosphere. We're in a much different place than that now. And the intent of those teachings were to help us advance and mature, but it was the equivalent of explaining tax code to a toddler. Now our species is older and ready to comprehend. The sign that we've entered adulthood is to take guidance from the lessons that we've had and to mature and genuinely apply them for the benefits we perceive on our own. Not because of fear of punishment, not because of a promised reward, but because it's the right thing to do, and because we're committed to our own advancement. The better every human group fares, again, the better the collective experience of humanity overall. All ancient writings have been given for the sole purpose of helping us mature into a peaceful and productive society. We finally reach the age where we can realize our potential, and how we handle this information and go forward will be the test. Until next time, remember, seek truth, reclaim your knowledge, your existence, and your reality.